Welcome to day 17 of the Marvel Movie Marathon. We are reaching the home stretch, and today we're going to be checking in on our friendly neighborhood wall crawler, Spider Man. This is the third cinematic version of Spider Man we've gotten in the last 15 years. Tobey Maguire thought he was a great Peter Parker. Andrew Garfield, I thought he was a great Spider Man. But I feel like Tom Holland nails the character, both sides of him, and I am happy with this version of Spider-Man. I always have Tobey in my heart, but I love this version of Spider-Man. Back in 2015, when Sony made the deal with Marvel to bring Spider-Man to the MCU, it was a huge deal. It was something we never thought would happen. It was definitely unprecedented, and the fact that he was going to show up in Civil War, just got us excited. And we just kept thinking, who would be the new Spider-Man? This dude has it all. He has charm, he can do backflips, he can play a nerd, he can be quippy, and I think Tom Holland is just a gift from the heavens. In this movie, you have Spider-Man trying to reach out to Tony Stark, and he's waiting for his next mission, and he's trying to balance high school life as well. But when the Vulture starts selling these crazy alien weapons in his neighborhood, it's up to Spider-Man to put a stop to him. And that's the great thing about this movie. Right off the bat, the stakes are very low. They're very Spider-Man level. He's not about saving the world or going on like these crazy adventures. I mean, sometimes he does. He gets wrapped up in bigger stuff, but on his own, he's usually fighting lower level criminals, and the Vulture is like the perfect guy for him to match up with, because he's just the guy that wants to support his family by making money off of, alien tech, like from the Battle of New York or the Sokovia incident. He's taking these pieces of technology and selling them on the black market so his family would live a good life. It's an understandable motivation, especially from a fellow New Yorker. Things are expensive here. And that's another thing I like about this movie. It really feels like a movie shot in New York. The previous films, they focus on Manhattan, but here you see Spider-Man go to work in his neighborhood of Queens, and they shot on location, so a lot of these places are recognized, and you see him interact with the community as well, like the guy from the bodega. In a lot of Spider-Man films, it's just about his relationship with Mary Jane or Aunt May or Harry Osborn. Here you get to see his relationship with more people. He has a best friend in this movie named Ned, who finds out his secret identity, which is unique because Spider-Man's secret identity is like a big part of the character, and for him to have a friend that he can talk about his heroics with is a breath of fresh air, because Spider-Man is very isolated. He can't talk to anyone about what he's doing because he needs to keep his loved ones safe. And the great thing about the Marvel Universe is nobody has a secret identity. Everybody knows who Tony Stark is, who Steve Rogers is, but not Peter Parker. So that's why it's great for him to finally have someone to talk to. And then speaking of Tony Stark, he does show up a few times in this movie. He plays like a sort of mentor figure to Peter. He's the one that gave him his suit, obviously. And he seems to be encouraging him to do his daily superheroics, even though I doubt it's not part of the Sokovia Accords, because the government's not telling him to do this stuff. So what happened to that? Did they just forget about the Sokovia Accords? It's name dropped in one of Peter's classes. So it still exists. So I don't know how Spider-Man can get away with being a superhero without being registered, but that's just me nitpicking. A lot of people don't like Tony Stark being a mentor to Peter Parker. They feel like he's the catalyst for his whole character, and I disagree. In this universe, it makes total sense that Peter Parker would be a Tony Stark fan and would look up to him because they both deal in science and technology. So I think it was a good fit for Peter to have a surrogate dad in Tony, and I love their scenes together. Their rapport is really well done, and the fact that he just wants to make Iron Man proud is pretty cute. The fact of the matter is, we've had, before this film, 5 different Spider-Man movies, so Marvel Studios really had to mix it up with the character. They had to sort of reinvent him in a way, and I think this film does that. It focuses on the high school aspect of him, which I like. It feels like an episode of Degrassi with Peter Parker in it, and I'm a sucker for coming of age stories. In the previous films, they kind of like rush him out of high school, but here we see his classmates, we see him in different classes, we even see his teachers. There's one, the gym teacher is played by Hannibal Buress. He's a great comedian. I love him to death. Martin stars in it, and he's great. Just the little bit characters here and there, they make the world feel alive, and the school feels like a New York school because it's mixed with different races. Because New York is a mixed city. It's a melting pot. So the students in Peter's school feel real. It feels like I'm watching an actual New York school. And I think that's why I like the movie so much, because it's the most relatable movie out of all these films to me, because I went to a New York school. I know what it's like. Not a special one for science, but in general. And I love the banter he has with his little AI, Karen. Some people didn't like that he had an AI. A lot of people were calling this Spider-Man Iron Man Jr., and I get it, but I enjoyed it. Again, we've had so many iterations of Spider-Man in the past. This one had to be different. And again, Tony Stark made his suit, so it makes sense that he would have an AI. And instead of, an inner monologue, he has this artificial intelligence to talk to. And it's really cute how she's encouraging him to ask Liz out on a date. I wish I had an AI that would encourage me to ask people out on a date. I also love the suit. It's pretty much the classic Spider-Man suit with a little bit of, black flair here and there. I love the wings he has, the little different web shooters. And we have some villains here. There's 2 different versions of the Shocker. I don't know why. I guess the filmmakers really just like the Shocker, so they put 2 of them. But Shocker doesn't really make much of an impact. He just kind of shows up, swings his fist a couple of times. Whatever. Donald Glover's in this film. I think if the filmmakers knew how big Donald Glover would be a year after the film came out, they probably would have given him a little bit more screen time, because he just shows up for literally 2 minutes. Hopefully we'll see him in future Spider-Man movies. And then you got Michael Keaton as the Vulture. He has a thing for wings. He was Batman, he was Birdman, and he's the Vulture. And he's a pretty damn good villain. The scene with him in the car driving Peter and Liz to Homecoming is one of the best scenes in the MCU. It's so intense. And you can just see the gears turning in his head. It's like, hey, this freaking dude is Spider-Man. He's smart enough to figure it out. You think his classmates would be a little more wise. I mean, Peter has a pretty distinct voice. You can tell this dude is talking underneath the mask. But he's a great villain. He has a cool design with the helmet and the wings. And again, you just understand his motivation. Because Tony Stark basically took his job after the Chitauri battle in New York. So he had to fend for himself. And again, this is Tony Stark creating yet another bad guy. What is with Tony Stark creating all these villains, man? Seriously. You got Aunt May. She's not in the movie much, but I love her and Peter's scenes together, especially the scene where she calls him out on his bullshit. She knows about him cutting class and skipping out on the decathlon and Washington, and she's great. I never understood why Aunt May had to be an old woman. I love a hot Aunt May. I love that everybody just is attracted to her. It's a great gag. I love their scene together where she's practicing dancing with him and showing him how to put a tie on, and she's encouraging him to go to the party. Like, that's what Aunt May needs to be. She just needs to be Peter's encouragement. And a crazy twist at the end. She finds out that he's Spider-Man, which is like never happened in the movies, I believe. She even attempts to drop an F-bomb, I should say. Which is great because we can be done with the drama of someone, close to him finding out his secret identity. It's been done to death. Let's just have people in on his secret and get it over with. Flash Thompson is also great in this movie. He's like a modern bully. He's making fun of Peter for being smarter than him, which is hilarious. And the Penis Parker joke is great. The girl who plays MJ, she's a fantastic character. She gets a tiny bit of screen time, but she uses it to full effect. She is hilarious, all her lines. And I didn't get the hate why people didn't like her, because MJ is not black. Like, for the record, I think Mary Jane is a pretty bland character. If you're going to change a character in a big way from the comics, let it be Mary Jane, who's just boring. She was always a damsel in distress in the Raimi movies. Here she actually has some personality. Like, thank God. Like, I love MJ. I hope she has a bigger role in the sequel. We also get some really funny cameos from Captain America in this film. He's wearing his Avengers 1 outfit, and he's telling the kids, how bad the tension is, or if your body's going through changes. I think it's perfect. It's way better cameo than he had in Thor: The Dark World. And then he even trolls the audience for waiting for the post-credit scene. It's fantastic. Tony Stark and Pepper Potts, they get engaged in this film, and it's kind of like an afterthought. The last time we saw Tony, he was split from Pepper, and then here, all of a sudden, they're engaged, and they don't make a big deal about it. They're like, oh, let's just get engaged for the press. And I thought that was kind of cheap, because these characters have been around since the beginning, and you're just gonna do that big moment in Tony's life off screen. That's pretty cheap. And I also think there's a lot of unnecessary CGI in the film, especially with Spider-Man's suit. The dude is just standing around in some scenes, and he's CGI. I don't understand. Like, you have this great suit, use it, and the dude could like do flips and stuff. But it's very noticeable, and it's crazy because we've come so far in technology since the first Spider-Man, and I just don't like when the character's in CGI when he shouldn't be. Like, come on, man. Do some practical stunts. My favorite scene in this film is when Peter has to lift the rubble up above him. First, he's scared, and you realize, like, this dude is just a kid, man. Like, and he sells it, just the fear of, being under a collapsed building, You feel for him, man. It hits you right here. But then he gathers his strength and he realizes, it's not this suit that makes him Spider-Man. He's what makes him Spider-Man. And he lifts that heavy ass rubble off of him and he gets back to work. And it's a part of why I like MCU Spider-Man. He's a kid amongst all these superheroes. He's out of his element. He's out of his league. He might whine a bit, but he's still learning. And I can't wait to see this version of Peter Parker grow and mature into the future. And hopefully people will learn to love him along the way. But me, I can't wait to see him swing around New York once more. Speaking of New York, we have one more New Yorker that we have to introduce. And he's a pretty big character. So join me tomorrow on the Marvel Movie Marathon as we dive into Doctor Strange. Thank you for watching.